In 2018, on a cool autumn evening in a quiet suburban neighborhood, life appeared peaceful. This particular street, lined with family homes and carefully manicured lawns, looked like a picture of normalcy. In one of those houses lived Jake and Sarah, a couple who had been together for 12 years. Their life looked ideal from the outside, with stable jobs, a cozy home, and a beautiful 6-year-old daughter, Ella. But like many seemingly perfect lives, there's held secrets just beneath the surface. Jake, 34, is a software developer working from home, a guy who thrives on routines. Early mornings are his favorite. Coffee brewing, quiet moments before the day begins, and the hum of his computer as he dives into work. He's dependable, the type of person you trust without question. Back in college, Jake had been drawn to Sarah's bright, energetic personality. She had a way of lighting up the room, and even now, as a high school English teacher, her passion for literature and her students keeps her grounded. Sarah, now 33, loves her job. It's fulfilling, giving her a sense of purpose outside her family life. Their daughter, Ella, is a cheerful, imaginative first grader. Her bedroom, painted a soft pink, is filled with picture books and her favorite toys. Ella is Jake's world. She's the light in his life, the one who reminds him every day that all his hard work is for something. To those who know them, Jake and Sarah seem to have it all. A stable family, a lovely home, and a relationship that stood the test of time. But lately, Jake has sensed a shift, something subtle yet unmistakable, lingering in the background of their daily lives. On a regular Tuesday evening, things feel off. Jake is wrapping up a day's work in his home office, and as he steps out to grab a snack, he notices Sarah cooking in the kitchen, her phone in hand. It's a routine scene, but something catches his eye. She glances at her screen, and for a brief moment, a smile crosses her face. A smile that disappears as quickly as it appeared. Jake pauses, watching her for just a second too long, but Sarah doesn't notice. In any other situation, this would be nothing, but somehow it feels strange. He brushes it off, telling himself it's nothing. But over the next few days, he can't quite shake that image from his mind. The smile, the brief look of something hidden. Little things start to add up. Sarah's phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, now seems to follow her everywhere. At dinner, when it buzzes, she glances down and turns it over, placing it face down on the table. Jake notices but says nothing, feeling a strange sense of unease creeping in. One night, as he's tucking Ella into bed, she asks him a question that catches him off guard. "Daddy, why does Mommy work so late sometimes?" It's a simple question, but it makes Jake pause. He tells her that sometimes adults have to work late, but his mind starts racing. Has Sarah been working late? He tries to recall the last time she mentioned staying late at school, but nothing stands out. It's just a question, but it plants a seed in Jake's mind, one that he can't easily ignore. The following day, as Jake works from his office, he finds himself glancing toward the living room where Sarah usually leaves her things. Her bag is there, and his gaze drifts to her phone, sitting on the kitchen counter, face down as usual. There's a quiet curiosity building in him. He brushes it off again, reminding himself that he trusts Sarah. But something feels different, and he can't quite put his finger on it. Later that evening, as they settle in for their usual routine, Jake tries to engage Sarah in conversation. He asks about her day, her students, anything to see if she'll open up a bit more. But her responses are brief, distracted. When he asks about work, she mentions a few projects, but her mind seems elsewhere. Jake feels a growing sense of isolation, like there's an invisible wall between them, something he can't quite understand. A few days later, Jake is clearing out the car when he notices a crumpled receipt wedged between the seats. It's from a coffee shop downtown, one he doesn't remember visiting recently. At first, he dismisses it, but then he notices the date. It's from a day when Sarah had mentioned she'd be at school. He stares at it for a moment, that quiet feeling of doubt returning. Jake stands in the kitchen, staring at the coffee shop receipt, trying to make sense of it. Sarah had told him she was working late at school that day, and yet, here was proof she'd been somewhere else entirely. The receipt seems innocuous at first, just a coffee, a pastry, but it represents a deviation from what she told him, a fracture in their trust. Jake tries to shake it off, reasoning that maybe she stopped for a break. But doubt has taken root, and no amount of rationalizing can erase the sinking feeling in his stomach. Over the next few days, that feeling gnaws at him, urging him to look a little closer, notice a little more. Jake becomes increasingly aware of Sarah's distance, her frequent glances at her phone, the way she holds her phone screen close when she thinks he's not looking. He can feel the weight of it between them, this invisible barrier that's slowly pushing them apart. Sarah's small gestures, once affectionate, now seem distracted, half-hearted. When she kisses him goodbye in the morning or sits with him in the evenings, there's a hesitation, a wall he can't break through. Then, one night, Jake finds himself alone in the living room while Sarah is in the shower. Her phone buzzes on the table, and for a moment, he's paralyzed, torn between trust and suspicion. He tells himself it's wrong to snoop, but something in him feels desperate for answers. The phone buzzes again, and he glances at it, seeing a message notification with just the word, "Miss you." His heart races. He looks away, willing himself to let it go. But the thought stays with him. After she's asleep that night, Jake lies awake, grappling with his instincts. He thinks back over the years, the trust they've built, and the promises they've made to each other. But something has changed, and no matter how he tries to ignore it, he can't shake the feeling that something is deeply, fundamentally wrong. As the days pass, the tension mounts, eating away at him bit by bit. One Saturday afternoon, while Sarah is out with friends, Jake's curiosity gets the best of him. He pulls up their cell phone bill online and scans through the call logs, not entirely sure what he's looking for. But then he sees it. One number over and over at odd hours, late at night or early in the morning. It's the same number on every page, sometimes several times a day. Jake doesn't recognize it, and the sight of it sends a chill down his spine. He debates what to do with this information. He's never been one to jump to conclusions, and part of him wants to believe there's a reasonable explanation. But another part, a darker, angrier part, feels betrayed. He can't help but wonder who Sarah's been talking to so frequently, and why she hasn't mentioned it. The next few days are a blur of suppressed frustration and forced smiles, his mind constantly drifting back to that mystery number. Finally, unable to hold it in any longer, Jake decides to confront her. One evening, as they're sitting down for dinner, he brings it up as casually as he can manage. "Hey, I noticed on our phone bill there's this number that keeps showing up. I thought it was odd," he says, trying to keep his tone light. "Do you know who it is?" Sarah's reaction is immediate. Her face goes pale, and she stumbles over her words, clearly caught off guard. "Oh, it's just a friend from work," she says, her voice a little too quick, a little too defensive. Jake studies her, sensing the lie in her response. He decides to press a little further. "A friend you call that often? And that late at night?" he asks, his voice quiet but firm. Sarah looks down, avoiding his gaze, her hands fidgeting nervously. "Jake, it's nothing," she says, forcing a smile. "Just a coworker who's been going through a rough time. I was trying to be supportive." She reaches across the table to take his hand, but he pulls away, hurt and distrust plain on his face. Jake's silence speaks volumes. He wants to believe her, wants to trust that she's telling the truth, but the evidence is mounting, and it's getting harder to ignore. That night, as he lies awake, he can't shake the feeling that Sarah is hiding something. He decides to dig deeper, hoping that maybe he's wrong, that maybe he'll find something that explains everything away. As days turn into weeks, Jake becomes more consumed by the need for answers. He starts checking her phone when she leaves it unattended, scanning for anything that might clue him in. The messages are sparse, often deleted, but he catches glimpses of conversations that seem off. Vague words, coded phrases, and the occasional heart emoji that twists his stomach in knots. The more he finds, the angrier he becomes. It's not just the possible betrayal, but the deception, the way she's been keeping secrets right under his nose. He's always thought of their relationship as open and honest, a partnership built on trust. But now he feels like a stranger in his own home, questioning everything he thought he knew. One evening, Jake decides to confront Sarah again, this time determined to get real answers. As she walks through the door after work, he's waiting for her in the living room, his expression hard and unyielding. "Sarah, we need to talk," he says, his voice steady but tinged with anger. She freezes, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" she asks, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want the truth," Jake says. "No more excuses, no more lies. Who is he?" Sarah's face crumples, and for a moment, he thinks she might deny it. But then, to his surprise, she lets out a shaky sigh and sits down, avoiding his gaze. "It's complicated," she begins, her voice choked with emotion. She struggles to find the right words, and Jake can see the guilt written all over her face. "Complicated?" he repeats, incredulous. "You've been lying to me for weeks, maybe months, and that's all you can say?" He stands, pacing the room as his frustration boils over. "I thought we were in this together. I thought I could trust you." Sarah tries to explain, but her words come out jumbled, her story fragmented and evasive. The more she speaks, the angrier Jake becomes, his patience worn thin by the constant deception. It feels like his whole world is crumbling around him, everything he's built with her falling apart. In the days that follow, their relationship is tense, fraught with unspoken resentment and mistrust. Jake feels like a stranger in his own home, unable to shake the feeling that he's been betrayed. He tries to go about his daily life, but the weight of it all bears down on him, making it impossible to find any peace. At this point, he realizes he has a choice to make. He can either continue down this path of suspicion and pain, or he can confront the truth head-on, no matter how much it hurts. As he stares out the window one rainy evening, he makes up his mind. He won't let this go until he has the answers he deserves. The next steps he takes will determine the future of their marriage, and his own peace of mind. If you're hooked and want to know what happens next, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on what Jake should do next, and stay tuned for the next part of the story. The days following Jake's confrontation with Sarah are filled with a tense silence. He tries to focus on work, on Ella, on anything that can distract him from the gnawing feeling inside. But no matter what he does, the doubts linger. Sarah's vague apologies and half-hearted explanations only deepen the sense of betrayal that's taken hold of him. Jake feels like a man stranded at sea, his trust slowly drowning with every passing day. Then, one evening, just as he's about to put Ella to bed, he notices Sarah slipping out the door without a word. She's dressed up, more than usual for a casual night out, and though she claims it's just a quick trip to see a friend, Jake's instincts scream otherwise. He fights the urge to follow her, to confront her, but the feeling festers. When she returns hours later, he asks where she's been. Her answers are vague, her smile forced, and Jake is left staring at her, realizing that the woman he thought he knew so well feels like a stranger. The turning point comes one night when Jake decides he can't live with this uncertainty any longer. The following day, he reaches out to a private investigator, feeling a mixture of guilt and relief. Part of him feels like he's crossing a line, but another part, the part that's been silently suffering for months, can't go on in the dark. He needs answers. A week later, Jake receives a call from the investigator. The man's voice is calm, professional, but Jake can sense a heaviness behind the words. "Mr. Carter, I think it's best if we meet in person to go over the findings," the investigator says. Jake's heart pounds as he hangs up the phone. He tries to focus on his work, but his thoughts keep drifting to the impending meeting. That evening, he finds himself driving to a small, dimly lit office, his stomach churning with anticipation. The investigator greets him with a sympathetic nod, gesturing for him to sit. "Mr. Carter," the investigator begins, handing over a thin file. "I understand this isn't easy, but I've gathered evidence that I believe will answer your questions." Jake opens the file slowly, his hands trembling. Inside, he finds photographs, timestamps, details that lay out the truth in brutal clarity. There are photos of Sarah with another man, laughing, holding hands, even sharing an intimate kiss. The investigator speaks softly. It seems this relationship has been ongoing for several months. He pauses, giving Jake a moment to process. Jake stares at the images, each one a knife in his heart, each one shattering the illusion he's held onto for so long. His mind races, flooded with memories of their life together, the promises they made, the family they built. It's as if everything he knew has been rewritten in an instant, replaced by betrayal and deceit. Jake leaves the investigator's office in a daze, barely able to process what he's seen. When he gets home, he sits alone in the dark, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. He feels an overwhelming mix of anger, sadness, and despair, the betrayal cutting deeper than he ever thought possible. After hours of silent agony, he decides he needs to confront Sarah one last time. He can't live in this lie anymore. The next evening, Jake waits until Ella is asleep before calling Sarah into the living room. She senses the seriousness of his tone and sits down, avoiding his gaze. "Sarah," he begins, his voice steady but filled with barely suppressed emotion. "I need you to tell me the truth. I know about him." Sarah's face pales, and she looks away, wringing her hands nervously. "Jake, No," he interrupts, his voice firmer. "No more lies. I want to know everything. How long? Why? After everything we've been through." He trails off, his voice breaking as he struggles to hold back his anger and pain. Sarah takes a deep breath, finally meeting his gaze. "It started a few months ago," she admits, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Jake. I was lonely. You were always so busy with work, and I felt invisible." Jake listens, his face a mixture of hurt and disbelief. "So that's it?" he asks, his voice laced with bitterness. "You felt lonely, so you decided to throw away everything we built together?" Tears fill Sarah's eyes as she tries to explain, but her words feel hollow, like excuses he's heard 100 times before. "I didn't think it would go this far," she whispers. "I was confused. I didn't know how to tell you." Jake stands up, unable to sit still any longer. "You didn't know how to tell me?" he repeats, his voice rising. "So instead, you lied to me, you lied to our daughter, and you went behind my back for months." Sarah flinches, guilt written all over her face. She tries to reach out, but Jake pulls away, shaking his head in disbelief. "Jake, I'm sorry," she says, her voice breaking. "I know I messed up, but I still love you. I want to fix this." "Fix this?" Jake laughs bitterly. "You think you can just apologize and everything will go back to the way it was?" The tension in the room is unbearable, the air thick with anger and betrayal. Jake feels like his whole world is crumbling, the life he once knew slipping away with every word Sarah says. He doesn't know if he can ever forgive her, let alone trust her again. In the days that follow, Jake is consumed by a whirlwind of emotions. He tries to focus on Ella, to be there for her, but the weight of Sarah's betrayal is a constant burden. He considers his options, wondering if there's any way to salvage what's left of their relationship, but every time he thinks about it, he's reminded of the lies, the deceit, the broken promises. One evening, as he's tucking Ella into bed, she looks up at him with innocent eyes and asks, "Daddy, are you and Mommy okay?" The question catches him off guard, and for a moment he doesn't know how to respond. He forces a smile, assuring her that everything's fine, but inside, he feels like he's lying to her, just as Sarah lied to him. Jake knows he can't keep living this way, torn between the love he once felt and the pain that now consumes him. He realizes he needs to make a decision, not just for himself, but for Ella as well. He deserves a chance to move forward, to find peace, and to rebuild his life, even if it means letting go of the past. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more gripping stories like this one. Leave a comment with your thoughts on Jake's next move, and stay tuned for the next part of this journey and the weeks that follow. The tension in Jake and Sarah's home only grows heavier. They navigate their daily routines in near silence, avoiding eye contact and pretending that everything is fine when Ella is around. But the truth looms over them like a dark cloud, impossible to ignore. For Jake, the hardest part is knowing that the life he thought he had built with Sarah is nothing more than a fragile illusion. His love for her has been replaced by a hollow ache, a sense of betrayal that eats away at him every day. One evening, Jake's frustration reaches a breaking point. Sarah has been staying late at work more often, and Jake can't help but wonder if she's still seeing the other man. He tries to ignore his suspicions, but every time she leaves the house, a wave of anger and hurt crashes over him. Finally, after yet another late night, he confronts her as she walks through the door. "Who were you with tonight?" he asks, his voice tense, barely concealing his anger. Sarah freezes, her eyes wide with surprise. "Jake, I was at work," she says, her tone defensive, but he can hear the hesitation in her voice, the way she avoids his gaze. "Really?" Jake presses, his voice rising. "Because I don't believe you. How am I supposed to trust anything you say after everything you've done?" Sarah sighs, rubbing her temples as if exhausted by the conversation. "Jake, I'm trying to make things right. I've apologized. I've done everything I can to prove that I'm committed to fixing this. But you won't let it go." "Let it go?" Jake laughs bitterly. "How can I just let it go? You lied to me, Sarah. You betrayed me, and now you expect me to just forget it." Their argument escalates, the pent-up anger and resentment pouring out of both of them. They go back and forth, each accusation cutting deeper than the last. Finally, Jake shouts, "I can't do this anymore, Sarah. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. And I don't think I want to." The words hang heavy in the air, the finality of them sinking in. Sarah stares at him, her face a mixture of anger and sadness, but she doesn't argue. Instead, she simply nods, as if accepting that their marriage might truly be over. Without another word, she turns and walks up the stairs, leaving Jake alone with the weight of his decision. Over the next few days, they barely speak. They go through the motions, but there's a sense of inevitability in the air, a feeling that their marriage is unraveling with each passing moment. Jake begins to think about what life would look like without Sarah, about the possibility of starting over, even though the thought terrifies him. He knows it won't be easy, especially for Ella, but he can't keep living in a lie. One evening, while Jake is helping Ella with her homework, she looks up at him with those innocent eyes that make his heart ache. "Daddy, why is Mommy so sad?" she asks, her voice filled with concern. Jake forces a smile, trying to shield her from the pain that's tearing him apart. "Mommy's just going through a hard time, sweetheart," he says softly. "But we're going to be okay. I promise." But deep down, he knows that nothing will ever be the same. He's faced with a choice. Continue living in a broken marriage, or take a leap of faith and try to find happiness on his own. That night, as he lies awake, Jake realizes that he's already made his decision. He knows that staying in this marriage would only lead to more pain, more resentment. He deserves a chance to heal, to move forward, and maybe one day to find love again. With a heavy heart, he decides to file for divorce. The next morning, he sits Sarah down and tells her his decision. She's quiet, her face pale, but she doesn't protest. Instead, she nods, as if she's been expecting this all along. "I understand, Jake," she says softly, her voice barely audible. "I'll move out." As she gathers her things and leaves, Jake feels a mixture of relief and sadness. He watches her go, knowing that this is the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. It's a painful goodbye, but he knows it's the right decision for both of them. Thank you for following Jake's story. If you're invested in what happens next, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let us know your thoughts on Jake's journey and stay tuned for the conclusion. After Sarah moves out, Jake tries to adjust to his new reality, but the house feels empty without her. Ella, sensing the change, becomes quieter, clinging to her father in a way she never did before. Jake does his best to maintain a sense of normalcy for her, but inside, he's battling his own emotional turmoil. Nights are the hardest, lying awake in the stillness, haunted by memories of the life he thought he'd have with Sarah. One evening, a few weeks after the separation, Jake is sorting through paperwork when he finds an old photo of him and Sarah from their honeymoon. They look so young, so full of hope for the future. A pang of sadness washes over him as he remembers those early days, back when they were so sure of each other. It feels like a different lifetime now. Then, just as he begins to feel like he's moving forward, Sarah reaches out unexpectedly. She calls, her voice tentative, saying she'd like to talk. Jake hesitates, a mixture of curiosity and dread knotting in his stomach. Against his better judgment, he agrees to meet her. They settle on a quiet cafe, a neutral place where they can talk without the weight of shared memories bearing down on them. When Jake arrives, he finds Sarah already there, looking nervous and out of place. She gives him a small, hesitant smile as he sits down. There's a heavy silence between them, both unsure where to begin. Finally, Sarah breaks the silence. "Jake, I wanted to apologize," she says, her voice wavering. "For everything. I know I hurt you in ways I can't ever take back." Jake listens, his face unreadable, but he feels the sting of her words. He'd waited for this apology for so long, but now that it's here, it feels almost hollow, like a piece of the puzzle that's too late to complete the picture. "Why now, Sarah?" he asks quietly, his gaze piercing. "Why couldn't you tell me this before everything fell apart?" She sighs, looking down at her hands. "I was scared," she admits. "Scared of facing the truth, of admitting to myself that I'd ruined something so good. I thought, maybe if I just kept going, I wouldn't have to deal with the guilt." Jake shakes his head, trying to keep his anger in check. "And you thought that was fair to me? To let me keep loving you, trusting you, while you were lying to my face?" Tears fill Sarah's eyes, and she nods, accepting his words without argument. "You're right. I was selfish, and I don't expect you to forgive me, Jake. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry." They sit in silence for a few moments, each lost in their own thoughts. Jake feels a strange sense of closure, but there's still an ache deep within him, a part of him that wonders if things could have been different. As they finish their coffee, Sarah reaches across the table, placing a hand on his. "I don't want to lose you completely, Jake," she whispers. "I know we can't be together, but maybe we can still be friends. For Ella's sake, if nothing else." Jake considers her words, his mind racing. He's not sure he can handle a friendship with Sarah, not with the pain still so fresh. But he knows Ella deserves to have both parents in her life, and if that means finding a way to be civil with Sarah, he'll do it. "All right," he says finally, his voice steady. For Ella. Over the next few weeks, they establish a new routine, one where they navigate co-parenting with as much grace as they can muster. It's awkward at first, filled with moments of tension and unspoken resentment, but slowly, they find a way to make it work. They agree to meet occasionally to discuss Ella's needs, keeping the focus on her happiness above all else. One evening, as Jake is dropping Ella off at Sarah's new apartment, he's struck by how different his life has become. The pain is still there, a dull ache that lingers, but there's also a sense of relief, of freedom from the lies that once held him captive. He realizes he's ready to let go of the past, to finally start healing. Just as he's about to leave, Sarah calls out to him. "Jake, wait," she says, her voice hesitant. He turns to find her standing in the doorway, a conflicted look on her face. I wanted to say thank you," she says softly, "for everything, for being there for Ella, for being the person I couldn't be. You've shown me what real strength looks like." Jake nods, a hint of a smile on his face. "Take care, Sarah," he says, his voice calm, and with that, he walks away, leaving the weight of the past behind him. As he drives home, he feels a newfound sense of peace, a quiet strength that comes from knowing he's faced his pain and come out the other side. He knows the journey isn't over, that there will be days when the hurt resurfaces, but for the first time, he feels like he can handle it. If you've been captivated by this story and want to see more content like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to us. and we look forward to bringing you more stories that inspire and resonate as Jake settles into his new routine. He starts to feel the weight of his emotional journey. He's come a long way from those early days of betrayal and heartbreak, but the scars remain, shaping his every decision. There are moments when he feels like he's finally moving forward, yet shadows of the past still creep into his life. Then, just as he begins to feel some sense of stability, life throws him another curveball. One afternoon, as Jake is picking Ella up from school, he notices a man standing with Sarah. At first, he doesn't think much of it, perhaps a coworker or a friend. But as he watches, he notices Sarah laughing, her body language relaxed and familiar with this man in a way that stirs something inside him. He doesn't recognize the man, but he senses there's more to the story. Ella, noticing her dad's distraction, tugs at his hand. "Daddy, that's Mom's friend Ben," she says innocently. Jake's heart sinks. He thought he'd prepared himself for this possibility, that Sarah might move on and begin a new relationship, but seeing it in reality is a gut punch. He nods, trying to keep his emotions in check as he waves to Sarah. She waves back, but there's a flicker of guilt in her eyes, as if she knows exactly what he's feeling. That evening, Jake can't shake the image of Sarah with Ben. He's worked so hard to rebuild his life, to let go of his pain, yet the sight of her moving on leaves him feeling raw and vulnerable. He thought he'd be able to handle it, but the reality is far more challenging than he anticipated. In the days that follow, Jake wrestles with a mix of emotions. Part of him wants to confront Sarah, to ask her about Ben and what he means to her. Another part, though, knows he has no right to interfere in her personal life anymore. They're no longer a couple, and she's free to see whomever she wants. Still, the feelings linger, a reminder of everything they once shared and lost. One day, during a routine handoff with Ella, Jake can't hold back any longer. As Sarah comes to the door, he gestures toward the living room, silently asking for a moment to talk. "Who is he, Sarah?" he asks, his voice calm but filled with tension. Sarah looks down as if she expected this question. "His name is Ben. We met through mutual friends," she says, choosing her words carefully. "He's a good guy, Jake. He knows about everything about the mistakes I made. He understands." Jake nods, struggling to hide his frustration. "I'm glad you're happy," he says, the words hollow in his mouth. But deep down, he wonders if she ever felt this way with him, if she ever cared as deeply as he did. Sarah looks at him with sympathy, reaching out to touch his arm. "Jake, you know I'll always care about you, but I need to move on, just like you do." Her words linger in the air, and Jake knows she's right. Holding on to his resentment, his lingering feelings of betrayal, would only keep him trapped in the past. He takes a deep breath, finally finding the strength to let go. "Take care, Sarah," he says quietly, stepping back as he turns to leave. Over the next few months, Jake begins focusing on himself. He takes up new hobbies, reconnects with old friends, and even considers going on a few dates. It's not easy, and he's often haunted by memories of the life he once shared with Sarah, but he's determined to keep moving forward. For the first time, he feels a sense of freedom, a chance to start fresh. Then, one evening, he gets an unexpected call from Sarah. There's panic in her voice as she explains that Ella is running a high fever, and she doesn't know what to do. Jake's heart races as he grabs his keys and rushes to her apartment, his mind racing with worry. When he arrives, he finds Sarah pacing the living room, her face etched with worry. She rushes to him, and for a moment, they share a brief, unspoken connection, both of them united by their love for Ella. They sit together, waiting for the doctor's call, both struggling with their emotions as they watch over their daughter. In that moment, Jake feels a strange sense of closure. He realizes that, despite everything, he and Sarah will always be connected by the love they share for Ella. They may not be together anymore, but they're still a family, and that bond will never break. When Ella finally starts to recover, Jake feels an overwhelming sense of relief. He glances at Sarah, seeing her vulnerability, her quiet strength, and for the first time, he feels no bitterness, no lingering resentment. They're simply two parents doing their best for their child. After that night, Jake finds a new sense of peace. He knows the journey isn't over, that there will be challenges ahead, but he's finally ready to move forward, to let go of the past and embrace the future. Thanks for watching. If you've been moved by Jake's journey, please like, share, and subscribe. We'd love to hear your thoughts on his story, so leave a comment below and stay tuned for more. As Jake embraces his new beginning, a surprising opportunity opens up at work. His company offers him a chance to relocate for an exciting project that promises career growth. It's an opportunity he's always dreamed of, and it comes at the perfect time, giving him the fresh start he's been craving. However, taking the position means moving to another city, away from Sarah and Ella. The decision weighs heavily on him. Ella has always been his priority, and he's unsure if he can be a good father from a distance. He can't imagine missing out on the small, everyday moments. Helping her with homework, tucking her in at night, and hearing about her day firsthand. He knows the move would give him the stability he needs, yet the thought of leaving her fills him with doubt. Jake decides to discuss it with Sarah, hoping to get her perspective. When he arrives at her apartment, she greets him warmly, sensing the weight of his decision. They sit down together, the atmosphere tense yet calm, as Jake lays out his thoughts, the opportunity, and his worries about how it might affect Ella. Sarah listens intently, her expression serious but understanding. After a long pause, she reaches out, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Jake, I know you'll always do what's best for Ella, but you also deserve this chance to find happiness and success. If this move is what you need, then go for it. We'll find a way to make it work. Her words, full of empathy and encouragement, make something click for Jake. He realizes he doesn't have to choose between his career and being a good father. He can be both. Moved by her support, he decides to accept the position, but only on the condition that he'll have a flexible schedule, allowing him to travel back frequently to see Ella. The weeks leading up to the move are filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Jake spends as much time with Ella as possible, creating memories he hopes she'll cherish even in his absence. They go on small adventures, from picnics in the park to weekend camping trips, and Jake finds himself soaking up every moment, appreciating the simple beauty of their time together. Finally, the day of the move arrives. Jake stands in the doorway, holding Ella close as they say their goodbyes, her small arms wrapped around his neck, and he whispers promises to visit as often as he can. She nods, her big eyes filled with tears, but also with understanding far beyond her years. Jake takes one last look at Sarah, who offers him a supportive smile, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they've been through together. The move goes smoothly, and Jake quickly settles into his new life. The city is vibrant, and the work is challenging but fulfilling. He finds himself thriving, both professionally and personally. For the first time in years, he feels a sense of purpose, a feeling that he's finally found his place. He still travels back to see Ella every chance he gets, and their bond remains as strong as ever. One weekend, while visiting, Jake takes Ella to a local carnival, a tradition they've had since she was a toddler. As they walk through the colorful booths, laughing and enjoying the festivities, he realizes how far he's come. The pain and betrayal that once consumed him have faded, replaced by gratitude for the life he's building. As the sun sets over the carnival, Jake feels a profound sense of closure. His journey has been long and painful, filled with heartbreak and healing, but he's finally found peace. He knows the road ahead will have its challenges, but he's ready to face them with strength and resilience. And as he watches Ella's face light up with joy, he knows he's made the right choices for both of them. If Jake's journey has resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and stay tuned for more stories like this. As Jake settles into his new life, he continues his commitment to being present for Ella. But just as he feels he's finally finding balance, a call from Sarah shakes him to the core. Ella has been struggling in school, acting out, withdrawing from friends, and even refusing to talk to her teachers. Sarah's voice is filled with worry as she explains the situation, confessing that she's unsure of how to help Ella on her own. Jake's heart sinks. He realizes that Ella's struggles might be due to his move, despite his best efforts to make the transition smooth for her. A pang of guilt hits him, and he questions whether he made the right decision in taking the job. Jake has always put Ella first, but now he's caught in a conflict between the life he's built and his responsibilities as a father. Determined to find a solution, Jake decides to take some time off work and return to help Ella through this difficult period. When he arrives, he finds her curled up in her room, her usually bright demeanor replaced by a sadness that breaks his heart. He sits down beside her, pulling her close, and for a while they just sit in silence. Finally, he gently asks her to share what's been bothering her. Ella looks up at him, her eyes filled with tears. "I just miss you, Daddy," she says, her voice trembling. "I know you're busy, but I wish you didn't have to be so far away." Her words hit Jake like a punch to the gut. He realizes that no matter how often he visits, the physical distance between them has created an emotional gap he hadn't anticipated. He's always thought that love and quality time would be enough to bridge the miles, but now he sees that Ella needs more. Over the next few days, Jake tries to rebuild his connection with Ella. He takes her to school, spends time helping with her homework, and reassures her that, no matter where he lives, he'll always be her dad. Slowly, she begins to open up again, and he sees glimpses of the joyful girl he knows so well. But every time he looks at her, the lingering guilt reminds him that his decision has had unintended consequences, ones he may not be able to fix completely. One evening, as he and Sarah sit together after Ella has gone to bed, Sarah brings up a difficult question. "Jake," she says cautiously, "have you thought about coming back? I know you love your job, but maybe being closer to Ella is more important right now." Jake is silent for a moment, absorbing her words. He'd worked so hard to rebuild his life, to find a path that was fulfilling and independent. Returning would mean giving up the career he's finally found satisfaction in. But as he looks at Sarah, he realizes that this isn't about him anymore. It's about Ella, and what she needs to grow up feeling secure and loved. After a long moment, Jake nods, his expression resolute. "I'll make arrangements to move back," he says quietly. He knows it won't be easy, but he's certain it's the right choice. He's willing to sacrifice his newfound stability to ensure Ella has the father she needs, close and constant. Over the next few weeks, Jake begins the difficult process of transitioning back. He discusses options with his company, working out a role that allows him to stay involved while being closer to home. It's a compromise, but one he's willing to make for the sake of his family. By the time he's back for good, he feels a renewed sense of purpose, knowing he's done what's best for Ella. The night he moves back, Jake takes Ella to her favorite spot, a hill overlooking the city where they used to go for adventures. As they sit together, watching the sunset, Ella leans her head on his shoulder, a peaceful smile on her face. "I'm glad you're back, Daddy," she whispers. Jake feels a sense of peace wash over him, a feeling he hasn't had in a long time. He knows the road ahead won't be easy, but for the first time, he feels like he's truly where he's meant to be, by Ella's side. If you're invested in Jake's journey and want to see more heartfelt stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you for being a part of this story in the months following Jake's return. Life begins to settle into a peaceful routine. Being back home, close to Ella, has given him a sense of purpose that work alone could never provide. With his career readjusted and his role modified, he's able to balance his work and family life in a way that brings him satisfaction and stability. Ella, too, begins to thrive once more. She's happier, more outgoing, and her struggles at school have diminished with her father's constant presence. Jake feels a profound sense of relief every time he sees her smiling, knowing that he made the right choice. The weight of his earlier doubts has faded, replaced by a newfound confidence in his ability to make decisions that are best for her, even if they come with sacrifices. Throughout this period, Jake and Sarah establish a respectful and cooperative co-parenting relationship. While the pain of their separation will always linger to some degree, time has allowed them both to find acceptance. Jake no longer feels resentment or bitterness. Instead, He feels grateful for the clarity he's gained and the lessons he's learned along the way. The shared responsibility of raising Ella has even rekindled a kind of friendship between them, a different, simpler kind of connection, built on mutual respect and understanding rather than romance. One evening, after Ella's soccer game, Jake and Sarah share a quiet conversation on the sidelines. They watch as Ella laughs and plays with her friends, her joy lighting up the field. "She's happy?" Sarah says, her voice filled with a mix of relief and gratitude. "I think we did all right by her, Jake." Jake nods, feeling a warmth spread through him. "Yeah, we did," he replies, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. They exchange a knowing look, a silent acknowledgement of their journey, the trials they've endured, and the peace they've found in co-parenting. With each passing month, Jake finds himself becoming more open to new possibilities, both personally and professionally. He's met people in the community, reconnected with old friends, and slowly started to allow himself to consider dating again. It's not something he's rushing into, but for the first time since his marriage ended, he feels ready to let someone new into his life. He knows now that he's stronger, wiser, and more prepared for the complexities of relationships. One afternoon, as he's sitting in a cafe working on his laptop, a woman approaches his table with a warm smile. She's a friend of a friend, someone he'd met briefly at a community event. They strike up a conversation, and Jake is surprised at how natural it feels, how easy it is to talk and laugh without the weight of his past pressing down on him. They exchange numbers, and he feels a flutter of excitement, a feeling he hadn't realized he'd missed. As Jake navigates this new chapter, he's filled with a sense of hope and optimism. He's built a life that brings him joy, one where he can be present for Ella and open to new experiences. The hardships of the past haven't disappeared, but he's learned to carry them with grace, using those experiences as a foundation for growth rather than letting them define him. In the final scene, Jake stands at the edge of a park, watching Ella play with her friends. He's overcome with a deep gratitude for the journey he's been through, for the lessons he's learned, and for the love that has guided him through it all. He knows the future will hold challenges, but he's ready to face them with strength and resilience. For the first time in a long time, Jake feels whole. If Jake's story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we hope you'll stick around for more heartfelt stories in the future.